Hello, everyone, and welcome to People of Earth podcast. My name is Aman, and today we are joined by a guest who has spent 2 decades at the very heart of one of the world's most iconic and challenging law enforcement agencies. With over 20 years of service in the LAPD, our guest rose to the rank of sergeant working the streets of Los Angeles during some of its most intense eras. She's an author, a social justice advocate, and a powerful voice for integrity within the uniform. As Sweden currently faces unprecedented challenges with gang violence and youth recruitment, there is perhaps no one better suited to help us understand the reality of the streets and leadership required to change them. Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey, it's an honor to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. How are you today?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I can't complain. And with that said, as I said, it's an honor to have you on the show. And I'm thinking, let's get straight to it. And what I'm wondering is, what was the very first spark or internal drive that led you to choose a career in law enforcement?
Well, when I joined the Los Angeles Police Department, I was a single mom who had a young son, had just gone through a divorce, and I was working for the state of California Department of Justice. I was in the clerical pool for the special agents. And this was a time when PCP was a very big deal. And they were working on a young Black guy who they were trying to get into custody. And so they used me, the agents asked me, since I was in the secretarial pool, if I would kind of help them with the sting. And so they wanted me to call this guy and make an arrangement for him to come and meet me at a local area restaurant. And I did. And he showed up to meet me. And as soon as he sat down in the booth, the special agents from the Department of Bureau of Narcotic Enforcement just converged on him and took him into custody. And I was like, wow, that was exciting. And that seemed like really easy work. And you guys make really good money compared to what I was making in the secretarial pool. So my question to the agents was, how do I get to do what you do? Because I need to make more money and I need a better job and all of that for my son. So one of the agents said, well, if you want to be a special agent, you need to get on with a law enforcement agency, go over there, work for a year, and then you can do a lateral transfer back to DOJ as a special agent after you get your post certification. And post stands for Police Officer Standards and Training. So that was my mindset. I was just going to get on the first police department I could get on. And I just started testing and applying everywhere. And because LAPD was under a consent decree at that time, they were required to hire more women and more minorities in particular. And so LAPD put me through the testing process, which consisted of about 6 different areas of testing. They put me through it first. They set me up for an academy date, and I joined with the mindset still of, I'm just going to be here for a year, and then I'm going back over to DOJ as a special agent. But once I got on LAPD and while I was in the police academy and started learning more about the department, because I really had no clue really what I was doing, I just know I needed a good job with some benefits. I learned that LAPD had a system where you could work for 20 years and then you could retire and get a lifetime pension. And so I was very, very young, and I decided, well, why would I leave? I'm just going to hunker down here on LAPD, and I'm going to do 20 years here. I'll retire at the end of the 20 years. I'll still be very young, and I can decide what I want to do with the second half of my life. And so that was my motivation. I just needed a good job with making good money with medical benefits for my son, and that's what got me there.
And during the time when you were at the academy, did you ever have a period where you just wanted to quit and do something else?
Well, yeah, I had that thought, but I could not do it in my mind because I had quit my job at DOJ to become a LAPD officer. And so since I quit a job to do this job, there was absolutely no way I was not going to see it to its conclusion. That being the police academy, which was 6 months, very difficult. I did prep for the police academy because they had classes that you could take that would get you in the best physical shape they could get you in before the police academy, hoping for success. And then, of course, once I graduated, I had to do another 12 months to get off probation at which point I would become what they call vested. So that means I couldn't be fired without cause. And so I was very singularly focused. First 6 months through the academy, I just got to get through it. And then 12 months through my probationary period, I just got to get through it. And then once I got off probation, now I'm in the finish line, 18 more years, and then I'm going to retire. So that was my mindset.
And when you entered the police academy, what was your vision of what a good officer looked like? Did you have like a vision? This is what a good officer looked like, or was that something that and took different shapes during the academy?
Well, when I joined the police department, this was a time when there was a lot of consternation in Los Angeles, particularly in the community where I live, because Black folks didn't really trust and or like police. And so I had a lot of friends and family who were concerned for me, and then friends who I lost because they just couldn't believe that I was going to join LAPD, given all that was going on with the police department and how some police officers treated people who look like me in our community. And so my mindset was, listen, I'm a Black woman first, and I'm going to do this job, and I am not going to allow this job to jade me, to taint me, to cause me to do anything that is not in my character, not who I am. And I had made a vow to myself that I'm going to treat every Black person, but particularly every Black person that I encounter with dignity and respect. And I'm going to treat them the way that I would want any police officer, if they had encountered my son, to treat him. I mean, he was a child at the time, but you understand what I'm saying. So I'm gonna just treat people the way I would want you to treat my child or my family member if you stopped them. And that was what I did. And guess what? It wasn't difficult to do. I figured out exactly how to be who I am and be a police officer, take bad guys to jail, those who run from you, those who fight you, those who want to cuss you out and call you names. I was able to do that for 20 years. Let folks have their dignity, because that's all people really want. Answer questions of people when they have it as you're taking them to jail, because that's all they really want, is to know, well, what's going on, officer? Why are you pulling me over? Why are you writing me a ticket? What are you arresting me for? And if you explain that to people, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be able to get compliance.
Yeah.
That was always my goal.
What you're describing here sounds like somewhat of a harsh in some ways, and I'm thinking the LAPD it feels like it was a tough, very male-dominated environment. How did you navigate through that internal culture just to get like a chance to do your job on the street?
Well, it is and continues to be a patriarchal environment. I mean, there are more women on police departments across these 18,000 police departments in the United States, but it's still very patriarchal. But, I'm a stubborn kind of girl, and I'm the kind of girl, if you tell me no, well, then I must. And so, I had partners who I would spend 8 hours in the car with them, male whites, because this is a male-dominated white man police department in the 80s, who didn't want to work with me. And they didn't make it a secret that they didn't want to work with me. This was a time when, the N-word was something that you would hear in the police station, that you would hear from supervisors, that I could hear from partners. This was way before Me Too. It was just me. And so I had just made up my mind that if you don't want to talk to me while we in this police car, that works for me too. We don't have to talk. And as uncomfortable as it might seem to some, I think you need to recognize it takes a certain kind of personality to be a police officer. And it's not for everybody. I realize that everybody who wants to be a police officer really shouldn't. You have to have a certain temperament. You have to have a certain mindset, a certain kind of stick-to-itness. And so that was me. And along the way, I also had some really amazing partners who taught me the game, if you will, showed me how to survive in that environment, helped me understand which battles to pick and choose, which fights to have, when to keep my mouth shut. And as I began to get more tenure and time on the job, Now I'm starting to be in a position where I've got enough time where I don't necessarily have to keep my mouth shut. I'm vested now. I'm not on probation, or I promoted within that structure. And now I get to say what happens when you get in the police car because I'm the senior officer. And so while it was difficult, again, my mindset was 20 years, you're not running me out of here. And so every day was just, a day to get through sometimes.
And when you on the force, and how often did you get colleagues that you could see pretty much right away that person shouldn't be on the force? They don't have the mindset or the personality for this.
Well, I mean, it wasn't a lot per se that I had any influence over, for sure. But, there were some that, were straight out racist. I mean, they were. There's some on there now that are straight out racist. Police officers come from society. There are officers then and now on the department who, don't interact well with, let's say, children. And, those officers shouldn't be working in a school environment. They shouldn't be a school resource officer because they don't have the patience. Or, officers who think, who are misogynistic and don't think women have a place on the job because they don't think they can do it, because they don't think they have the physical attributes necessary, when actually I think quite the opposite. I think girls rock. I think we do a way better job at being a police officer. While we may have limitations in terms of physicality and physical strength, I understand there's not a man out there I can beat up. But again, if you treat people with dignity and you treat people the way that you would want somebody to treat your own child, 9 times out of 10, you can get compliance. And so I've had fights with people. I never wanted to fight with people. And if I had to use my feminine charm and my good looks to get somebody to, turn around and put your hands behind your back and let me put these handcuffs on you, then that's what I would use. And if I couldn't do that and it didn't work, then let's fight.
Do you feel like somewhere it should be a little bit harder for some people to be a police officer? I'm thinking when you're at the academy and you're at like the final stages, should there be a different kind of selection to see that if this person is actually fit to be a police officer? I'm thinking like some sort of a mental test to see if they're racist, homophobic, anything like that. Should there be any tests like that to push those kind of people out?
Well, listen, police officers are well trained. At least the Los Angeles Police Department officers are well trained. And I like to think that most agencies are quasi. I understand that resources and all of that plays a part in training. And when you think of police departments, you think large, like LA or New York or, Chicago. But, some police departments, there's 18,000 different police departments in the US, and some of them consist of 6 people. And one of those is the police chief. So, it varies from department. But by and large, when I joined LAPD, we had to take a psychological exam. We only had to do it once. I think police officers should be psychologically evaluated, and I'll just say maybe every 2 years. And I say that because as a police officer, once you get out in patrol, you're exposed to partners who may have a certain proclivity, and maybe you didn't come on with bad intentions, but now you're working with somebody who is responsible for ensuring that you continue on that job. They're responsible for your evaluations. They're responsible for you getting off probation and you making it to the vested place, right? And so if you have a partner who's doing knucklehead stuff, and they're encouraging you to do it if you want to get off probation. I know what you learned in the academy, but this is how we do it in the street, is a phrase that you've got to make a decision who you are. But I think police officers, for the most part, come on for the right reason. They do an amazing job. They're professional and ethical, but there are some bad apples out there, and they can taint the rest of the bushel if you don't realize who they are and then get them off. Because listen, every time you see something that makes national news where a police officer is heavy-handed, there's always been a sign. Police officers don't start off murdering people because they won't sign a traffic citation. There are always things that lead up to that. And I took my role as a training officer once I promoted to that very seriously. And if I had a probationary officer who wasn't up to snuff, I didn't have a problem writing a bad evaluation. I didn't have a problem telling my supervisors that this guy or gal probably shouldn't be the police. And I would put pen to paper and say just that, so that I'm creating a paper trail. So once that person leaves my charge and they go on to another training officer, there's a record. And eventually, when there's enough smoke, you understand there's a fire that's about to rage.
I'm thinking about one of the environments that feel like it's very common for police officers is gang violence. What is it like when a neighborhood is, in quote, lost to gang violence? What happens to the people living there?
Well, there are a lot of circumstances and situations that cause, people to get involved in criminality, whether they're young, involved in gangs because maybe they're not two parents in the home, or they feel like they're not being heard at home, or their parents are distracted because they've got to, try to keep food on the table and lights on and all of that. And so the kids kind of get pushed to the side, if you will, and then they start migrating towards folks who are involved in foolishness. And some people are easily led. Some people are led to that environment. That's just how they're situated. They just have a proclivity to do stupid stuff. And so, it affects the community, and you begin to cannibalize your own community. You're living in a community where everybody is struggling and suffering, yet you're victimizing them. And so I think it's important for, I think problems with kids start in the home. And I think parents should not try to be friends of their children. I think that they should pay attention to what's going on, who their children are associating with, what kind of friends that they have. And, these are very different times that we live in, because when I grew up, I couldn't have a friend my parents didn't know their parents. I was latchkey because both my parents worked. I would come home from school and I'd be at home alone for a few hours. But we're in a situation now where kids are on computers all day, or tablets or phones, and you don't know who they're interacting with. You don't know who's influencing them. And it's so much easier for parents, I think, in these days and times, to allow these social media apparatus to parent their children. And you just don't know what's going to come out the other end if you're not paying attention.
The reason for me for asking that is in Sweden right now, we have a delicate situation, if you can call it that. In Sweden right now, we are seeing 13-year-olds being recruited for violent crimes. And there's an ongoing debate about incarcerating children that age. And based on your experience on the force, what do gangs offer these kids that society is missing? And do somewhere think that prison for 13-year-olds actually solves the problem?
I would hate to see a young person whose brain is not fully developed thrown into a penal institution with hardened criminals. And so while it's tricky, again, I think these problems start at home, and if you don't think to deter bad behavior, then it continues. And so deterrence certainly needs to be a part of the. What does that look like? What's fair, what's reasonable, and are you trying to deter? Are you trying to rehabilitate? Or are you just trying to punish and crush? Is a conversation that needs to be had. And if you're going to punish and deter children, then what are you going to do to the parents to deter their bad behavior? Not paying attention to their children, not parenting them, not making sure that they're going to school and staying in school and getting good grades and being respectful when they deal with authority. Because if you're not respectful in your home, then you understand why these kids get out on the streets and they're disrespectful to authority, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a police officer, or some other adult figure that they don't think they have to respect because their parents have kind of taught them, you can just do whatever you want.
When you were on the and you had to deal with year-olds doing heavier crimes, what was like normal procedure for you back then to deal with them?
Well, what I would always do with anybody is just try to, I wasn't much older than, some of these young people that were involved in gang activity, and just have a conversation with them. I work in this area, you live in this area, and I'm going to be here, and I'm going to see you, and I'm going to interact with you every time you get involved in something that causes me to be present in your life. And so, you can develop a rapport. There was community-based policing was kind of a big deal when I was growing up on the department. And I'm a firm believer that, if you get to know the people that you deal with in your community on a day-to-day basis, and you build trust and a rapport on some small level, maybe you might be able to influence someone who's headed in the wrong direction. I don't say no to anything, because if we don't try that, then we don't know whether it's going to work or not. But just to throw your hands up and say, let's get this 12-year-old and throw him in a cage and throw away the key, you best believe when that young person comes out of there, they're going to be very, very different than how they came in. And now you've got a bigger, stronger, meaner, angrier person that you're unleashing back into society.
If you were in a room with Swedish policymakers today, what would your advice to them? What do they need? And if they're
Well, I think with anything that we do, whatever your position, and whether you're a policymaker or a police officer, I think, common sense, right? And if sense were common, everybody would have it. So I would like to think that everybody in those decision-making positions do. And then it's important to be compassionate and to have some empathy for the people that you're going to be dealing with, or that you're going to be subjecting police officers to deal with. Because if you can't, as a police officer, even the worst of the worst criminals, but if you can't look at a person and think, wow, this could be my brother, this could be my dad, this could be, a family member, and you don't treat them that way, then you're kind of now part of the problem. I know that you can be empathetic, and you can show compassion, and you can deal with people who are in a difficult situation, who maybe aren't bad people, but just made a bad decision in the moment. And if you aren't capable, I don't think, of possessing those kinds of emotions, then it's very easy to objectify someone and treat them like a thing as opposed to a human being.
I'd like to circle back on and back to you on your time on the force. And I'm thinking, how did you maintain your moral compass for 20 years when the system around you sometimes wanted you to look the other way?
Well, it's just who I am. It's how I would have to. I say that, my parents raised me a certain way. I do the right, it's the right thing to do. And that's in everything, in all areas of my, and, I'm a very determined person. When I make my mind up about a thing, joining the police department was a thing I made my mind up to do, and I was going to see it to its conclusion. And I was determined to be the very best police officer that I could be. And I used my own experiences as a Black woman growing up in a community where distrust was rampant with police. I used my experiences as time went on as being the mother of young Black men about how I wanted to conduct and comport myself, and what I would require of those who partnered with me when we were out there in the field together. Now, I'm sure I worked with some guys that were some, bad actors, but they didn't do that with me, because, they, I wouldn't tolerate it, number one, and they understood, that. I think officers who misbehave kind of get to know who they can act up with, like a child, almost like an incorrigible child. You learn which partner. Okay, well, my regular partner who I cut up with is not here today. They got me with Dorsey. So today I'm not going to slap anybody or talk crazy to anybody. So I think in some regards, me being who I am kind of worked to my benefit, because I really didn't have to do a lot of deflecting. I didn't have to do a lot of managing of personalities with my partners. I was no nonsense. And they understood that about me as a police officer, as a training officer, and as a supervisor.
I'm thinking you must have had a lot of days where it was really tough and maybe exhausting and mentally putting a lot of pressure on you. How did you protect your your empathy and your mental health during all days on the force?
I didn't really think much about it at the time, but I believe now in retrospect that I had a pretty good support system. I had friends that I could talk to. I had a very dear friend who was working with me at DOJ when I was part of that clerical pool. And when I left to the LAPD, she left also, and she went to California Highway Patrol. And so we are still fast friends 50 years later. And, we would kind of lean on each other and talk to each other, her being a female Black and working for California Highway Patrol at around the same time I was, and we would share our experiences and just kind of be an ear for one another about what we were dealing with and what we were going through. And while there were some difficult times on LAPD, be clear, I had some amazing partners, amazing, of all ethnicities. And so I had those partners that I could lean on and share with and work through whatever it is that I was going through at times. So for me, and maybe my experience was very unique in that regard, because I'm not afraid to say if something is bothering me, I need to get it off my chest. I did.
And speaking of difficult and hard days, of all the cases you handle, what would you say is what was the most you ever had?
Well, I don't know that it was a difficult decision that I had to make under pressure. I mean, I've never been involved in any uses of force where I had to use deadly force.
Mhm.
In my 20 years patrol in uniform, I never shot anyone. I have had a few uses of force where I had to use force on someone to gain compliance, to get them in control and handcuffed. But that was not a lot either, just because of who I am, I think. Because of, like I said, the reasonableness in how I comported myself, because of the way that I dealt with people. I didn't take it personal. When somebody was mad at me about a thing I was doing professionally, because I don't know you and you don't know me. This is just a job. It's not personal. You commit a crime, I take you to jail. So I never felt like I needed to punish someone because they were angry with me. So, but in terms of some things that stuck with me over the years, I worked accident investigations, traffic division. And there was a time when I had another female partner, and we worked doing these investigations where we would investigate sometimes fatal accidents that involve DUI and fatalities. And one that stands out in my mind is a woman hit in a crosswalk by a drunk driver. And she was seriously injured, and her child that she was pushing in a stroller was killed. My partner and I did our on-scene investigation, and then we ultimately went to the hospital, where we were met by her husband, who did not know that his child had died in the accident. And he had to, the nurses asked us if we would accompany him into the room where they had been working on his child, who had succumbed to the injuries. And it was difficult to do, because I was a young mother and my partner, she was a young mom. And we had to put on our big girl underwear and go in there with this dad, and not only be professional, but be personal with him, to show this man some compassion and some empathy. And we grieved with him. We didn't know him, but we knew or understood what we thought he might be going through. And so that sticks with me. And then just real quick, one other one. I was a supervisor, and we had a radio call of a jumper. So this is a guy who's threatening suicide. He was up on a building, and we had spent about 30 minutes up there talking to this guy, my officers, trying to get him to come down. Young guy, at that time, he was about the age of one of my sons. And at some point during our negotiation with this young man, he looked to the left and he looked to the right. And I thought he was trying to figure out where's the ladder, but he backed up as he was looking, and then he just ran with all of his might, and he ran off the top of the building and committed suicide. Well, I don't know if he died, but he landed on the ground. I don't know what ultimately happened. And just, the thought of him landing, the bones crushing and all of that, watching him convulse, Fire department was there. They whisked him away to the hospital. So I never really understood if he died at the moment or if he died later from his injuries, but it bothered me.
Mm.
And when I talk about officers being evaluated psychologically as a supervisor, I went back to the police station and I told my watch commander that I thought we needed to have some professionals from behavioral services come and be there and available for all of the officers that were on scene who had tried our best to talk this young man off, and to no avail. And my lieutenant agreed, and we had BSS come. And by the time the officers started coming in, I'm telling my officers, hey, BSS is here if anybody wants to talk to them. And all of my officers, the men, they were like, no, Sarge, I'm good. I'm good. I'm fine. And so I told the lieutenant, okay, I'm not. What room do I need to go into to talk to somebody about this? But self-reporting that you're not in a good headspace or that you're having issues is not sexy. And it's not something many men want to do. And officers don't self-report. And that's why I think you find occasions where you'll have an officer out there in the field whose head is not on right and who probably shouldn't be in the field, but they won't admit it. And supervisors, because most of them are men too, look the other way and don't require and demand that somebody sit down and crack open their head and make sure everything is working. That's why officers should be compelled to have psychological exams every couple of years, because we see stuff that's just gnarly.
I understand. And I'm thinking, when you did your time on the force, you were there on your final day. You came home, you went to sleep. How did it feel the day after, when you your last day? What was the first thought and feeling after that?
When I retired,
Yeah.
oh my Lord, I could not have been happier to be gone. I retired with 20 years. I certainly could have stayed and done another 5 years. We got to 25 because, LAPD back then, they would dangle a little carrot in front of you and you can get a little more money on your pension base if you stay another 5 years, or 5 years beyond that, stay till you're 30. But I knew that there were actuaries that showed the longer you stay in that profession, and that's not unique to law enforcement, but there are some professions, the longer you stay, the less life you have on the other end because of the stressors, because of the things that you see. And so I was just happy to be gone. As a matter of fact, after I finally submitted my paperwork and retired, I got about a week or so later a letter from the department saying, hey, they have a program where if you want to come back, you can come back and work an additional 5 years, and we'll pay you your salary, you'll collect your pension, we'll bank it, and then you go for real in another 5 years. And I was like, well, why would I do that? I couldn't get to the shredder quick enough to get rid of that paperwork. No, I was happy to be gone. I was happy to be a mom full time and deal with my kids, because some of them were younger still. My 2 older sons, I had missed a lot of their important years, I felt. And I didn't want to miss that with my younger sons. And so I was happy to be gone. And my God is amazing and good. And it's been 26 years that I have been retired.
And since then, since that day, have you ever thought about joining another agency, FBI, DEA, anything like that?
Not even a little bit.
Not even a little bit.
No.
No. And given since your time after the force, and think about the time you spent on, I'm thinking today's job situation is pretty different globally, and I'm thinking police officer is one occupation that AI can strip you out of a job right now, and robots not currently. What would be your most important pieces of advice for a young person who's maybe thinking about making a difference, but is afraid of the harsh environment in society and law enforcement?
Well, what I would say to any young person that wants to be a police officer, I say go for it. It's a great job. It's a great opportunity. It's every generation, their time was easier, or maybe they had it harder. It just depends on who you talk to. But listen, if you want to be the change that you want to see in your community, on your police force, then you need to be there, because the change is going to come from the inside. You're going to be there and you'll be able to influence a young partner who you're working with, who might be headed in a direction that makes no sense in terms of how they treat people. I would have loved to have not necessarily me be there, but be the partner to to Derek Chauvin when he sat on the neck of George Floyd, and be that partner who could have pulled Derek Chauvin off of him and said, "What are you doing?" Or the partner to the officer who was outside of Breonna Taylor's home when they went there with a search warrant and decided that they're just going to shoot through the door haphazardly, not knowing who's on the other side of that door. You would be that partner that say, "Put your gun up, wait a minute, let's knock." So you've got to be on that department. But when you decide to join, don't go in blindly. I mean, I did, and it worked out for me, but know that it's not a matter of if, but when something goes sideways, when someone discriminates against you, when someone treats you in a way that is foreign to what you're used to. Discrimination, sexual harassment, misogyny, all of that stuff is real. It continues today. Be prepared for it. And so when it happens, it doesn't blow your hair off because you were kind of expecting it. And you've got an idea of how you want to deal with it. And if you are prepared and think it's possible, then when it happens, you'll be able, I think, to better handle it. So I say go for it. It's a great opportunity. I know police departments, some pay more than others, but to be able to provide for yourself and your family that you're ultimately going to have great medical benefits, and an opportunity, depending on when you join that department, to retire at a reasonably young age. Those are all as far as I'm concerned.
And with that said, I'd like to finish off with a non-police question that I have started to ask all my guests. And what do you find lacking in today's society that you would like more of?
If I had to say, I would go back to empathy and compassion. I think if people are able to put themselves in the shoes of another, you might reconsider how you deal with them, how you view them, and ultimately how involved you want to get in helping better their situation.
And with that said, for the audience who would like to follow you on your daily life to life, or catch any of your books, where can they find you, and how can they follow you?
Well, I have my website, which is SGT, the abbreviation for Sergeant, Cheryl, my name, CHERYL Dorsey.com. So that's my website. You can go there and you can kind of see, what I've been doing, what I might do in the future. I'm not as active currently as I have been in terms of speaking about issues. To be quite honest with you, I don't want to draw any more ire of folks who don't agree with everything that I say. So right now, I'm really just enjoying life and me. I also have written a book about my journey on the Los Angeles Police Department and the advocacy work that I've done since retiring. And that is Black and Blue, the Creation of a Social Advocate. And it's available on Amazon or through my website. If you wanted to get a copy and have me sign it, you can do that there, or you can just purchase it outright through Amazon. So thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate you wanting to know about my life and sharing my story with everyone in Sweden. And I'm looking forward to coming and visiting.
Thank you, and you're welcome. Whenever you're in town, just hit me up.
Love to.
Sergeant, thank you so much for your participation and your advice. And I wish you all the well, the retirement and your future travels.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and take care.
You too.